Hello, everybody, and welcome back to yet another very exciting episode of the Friends Talking Fantasy Podcast. My name is Charles, and with me today, as always, is my lifelong friend and co-host, Dylan.
I'm ready to talk some fantasy with my friend, Charles.
I am ready to talk some fantasy with my friend as well, Dylan, but not just any fantasy today, because today we are doing a fantasy book recommendations episode with a little bit of a twist, right, Dylan?
Yes, and that twist is based on the fact, and possibly the little-known fact, because I didn't really know about this until my partner pointed out to me relatively recently, is you now get 15 hours of free audiobook listening time from Spotify Premium. You know, like it feels like almost everyone has Spotify Premium at this point. So we're sorry if you happen to not have it. But if you do have Spotify Premium, then there's a plethora of audiobooks that you could be listening to on here instead of using up an Audible credit or whatever else you're doing. So 15 hours a month, that can be enough for a shorter book, or assuming it doesn't take away time for you using the, let's say, 1.5 times. That opens up a lot of options here, and I was really excited when I started looking at it. I'm like, okay, but how many books are actually going to be on here? And then I started, searching some of my favorite books up, and I'm like, whoa, this one's on here? Wait, that one's on here?
Yes.
And I was, really excited.
I've been through this exercise before, Dylan, with like my local library's app for downloading audiobooks, or even like Audible, like Kindle Unlimited kind of stuff. And us fantasy fans, first of all, 15 hours isn't enough. Maybe at 2x speed, or maybe at 1.5 speed, which is, depending on the audiobook narrator, it may vary. Michael Kramer, I go up to 2x, but lately I've been doing like 1.5x. But even then, it's like fantasy is kind of a niche in itself, and like I'm seeing a lot of really impressive selections here just from the quick glance that I've done in preparation for this. So I think fantasy fans, if you're not aware of this, and you listen to books at a fast speed, you could be able to get a lot of really good books out of your included in premium Spotify premium plans. So I think this was a great idea, Dylan, to dive into. I found about it from my partner as well. She listened to the Britney Spears biography, but we won't be recommending that today, although I've heard it's good. We're going to stick to fantasy. But the selection is vast, and I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah, I am too. And I was thinking, okay, how can I fit this in for myself? And I was like, well, something that I can do, other than just the simple, okay, I'm going to find an audiobook that's under 15 hours just to be sure, or I'm going to listen to it at fast enough speed just to be sure. I was thinking you can just start something a little bit more toward the tail end of a month and make sure you get in your 15 hours of listening time then, and then just keep it flowing through as the month turns over to the next one. And then, are you using up 2 months? Sure. But did you potentially, even at one time speed, listen to a 30-hour audiobook that you didn't have to pay anything extra for beyond what you're already paying for to listen to music? Yes. So how does this fit into your life? Only you can determine that. Yeah. But we have a few different ideas. And I think a lot of people probably, if they're anything like us, had no idea until recently, or maybe finding out just now from us that this is even an option for them. So it's found money, right? It's free real estate, as someone might say. So Charles,
Exactly.
are we ready? I've got my screen sharing right now, and we're in the section
because you have premium, and I just steal from my partner, so I don't have it on my computer. It's just on my phone. So we are
Yeah,
using
so
Dylan's, and mine is full of recommendations like Britney Spears' audiobook, you know, all these other audiobook by like celebrity like autobiographies where they totally wrote the book themselves.
yes.
It's a lot of those. So Dylan's got a lot of great sci-fi and fantasy recs here. So super excited to browse. I see a lot of places. Where do we start, Dylan? You're driving.
Yeah, where we start is I've just entered this part that has the sci-fi and fantasy audiobooks
Mhm.
listed that are on Spotify Premium.
Can
And
I just say right at the
they
beginning, something I'm loving is right at the top, new and trending releases. Friend of the show, Sarah El Arifi, is
yeah.
there with Feybound. Can you believe that?
Yeah, I mean I can believe it. This book is I haven't seen any of the sales numbers or if it's hitting Sunday Times best selling or anything like that
Mhm.
in terms of lists, but I was in the bookstore the other day and they had a whole stack of these Feybound novels,
Wow.
and they also in a separate indie bookstore they have their kind of new and trending section, and they had Feybound included there. So this book is getting the love that we know anything written by Sarah El Arifi deserves. We
Yeah.
haven't gotten the chance to read this one yet. It is uh, outside of the series that we've been reading, the Ending Fire, that is starting with the Final Strife, and
Mhm.
we absolutely love those books. We wish we got the chance to check those books out on audio because they're
Yeah.
so musical and they're
Yeah.
so rhythmic, and Sarah
Yeah.
said great things about those
And like
audiobooks. I
bringing
highly
in
recommend
performers
checking.
to play some of
Yeah,
those like spoken word with drum accompaniment um, performances. So
right.
would be very interested to check out Feybound. And of course, Sarah Larifi just holds a place in our heart. We had the crazy opportunity to interview her like days before her first novel,
Yeah.
Final Strife, was released, her first book ever. And that was one of our favorite interviews. You said that multiple times. And just watching her just launch into like the success that it's been really great, and Feybound just seems like another big win for her. So we'll get around to it eventually. Hopefully, we'll have Sarah on for a third time on the show. She's come twice already. She's so kind, so generous with her time. So it's just nice to see her right at the top of new and trending. It's really impressive.
Definitely. And I'll say that the Final Strife is available on Spotify Premium
Oh,
as
nice.
well.
The whole
Yeah, that
Sarah
was
collection.
I probably would have jumped right for the audiobook of that one if we weren't reading arcs and we didn't get the chance
Yeah.
to yeah, it wasn't out yet when we were reading the first book. But anyway, yes,
Let's.
Feybound up there. Highly recommend that. And my partner is reading that one right now. On she's not doing
Hmm.
the audiobook, but she definitely enjoys the book, and it's a little
Oh,
more
good.
romanticy style. So if you're a fan of Sarah J. Maas or Rebecca Yaros's Fourth Wing, all that kind of stuff, this will probably be right up your alley. But anyway, shall we continue, because there is this dive deeper
Mm-hmm.
section that comes up. We've got things like all fantasy, all sci-fi,
Mm-hmm.
epic fantasy. We've got fantasy action and adventure, space opera, contemporary fantasy, urban fantasy. All these
I
options
see a
here, Charles.
lot of
I
I Yeah, go ahead. I see a lot of things that we could recommend, but I see you hovering over a category, and I agree completely.
Yeah. I mean, I think our bread and butter when it comes down to it of all of these is epic fantasy.
Let's
So
dive
I'm
in.
I'm gonna click on that. And still in the new and trending releases, we do see Feybound up top. But
Yes, yes, love to
then
see.
let's get toward the most popular in this genre. What's coming up here?
Now we're talking.
So
These are the
yeah,
big hitters, Dylan. These are the
they
titans of the
are.
industry. It's a quite impressive selection.
Right. The first thing that comes up is a little known book. It's amazing it's even risen to the most popular in the genre. It's called A Game of Thrones. Charles, are you familiar with this series at all? It's a
It
Song of
sounds
Ice and
vaguely
Fire.
familiar. But we'll keep an eye out for this author, George R. R. Martin. He seems
Right,
like a
young
real
up
up
and
and
coming
comer to
author.
top the most popular of the fantasy genre. So, um, definitely keep an eye out on him. He's a must watch. Yeah, I mean, obviously, if these are some of the most, that's one of the most influential books either of us have ever read. We've gone on record saying that a bunch of times. So, an easy win there. I also see the Lord of the Rings collection is on here. You have this, the Silmarillion is on there. Like the whole Lord of the Rings trilogy is on there. And then Dylan, you were talking about the Hobbit trilogy also being on, or the Hobbit book, not trilogy. I'm thinking of the movies. The Hobbit book is being in here as well.
Yeah. The Hobbit is on here, and it's the version narrated by Andy Serkis, and this has received rave reviews from everyone that I've heard listening to this audiobook. So this is one that I believe Laura from our pod, when we did our live at TBRCon, books most worth rereading discussion, and that's in our feed here that you can find under fantasy book recommendations for books most worth rereading. This book, she was just, it was one of the most glowing reviews I think I've ever heard of an audiobook, and
Yeah.
that's because of the narration by Andy Serkis. I'll say my partner is listening to this one with her Spotify premium time, and this is a short book, so it's going to be a great fit for getting those 15 hours in. And Andy Serkis, as folks probably already know, was the voice of Gollum in Lord of the Rings.
He was the voice and the
right, true
actor, the performer.
revolutionary
He's dressed in that mocap
technology.
suit. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Then he went on to do like
top.
Planet of the Apes, and then he does some live action stuff. He was in a Marvel movie. He was in Black Panther. So yeah, fantastic actor, great performer. I mean, his vocal performance of Gollum is so iconic. And 20 years later, I remember when they announced this audiobook, I still have not listened to it, but to me it is like the obvious choice because he goes 100% in on the performances, and it doesn't surprise me that the reviews are glowing. So as a modern fan of the movies like that, if I were to pick up The Hobbit again, it would be the Andy Serkis audiobook version for sure.
Definitely. My partner played the part where Gollum actually comes up in
Riddles in
The
the Dark.
Hobbit, and it was just Andy Serkis at his absolute best. I mean, it's I don't know what to say besides he was doing the voice exactly the way that he does it in the movies, which is
that was a good choice
perfectly,
artistically to reprise the role.
Right.
Can you
Not
imagine
to
just
be
like Gollum.
Right.
Like he didn't even try.
It's like, I'm thinking of going another direction with Gollum for the audiobook. And it's like, no.
Yeah.
No.
Do the
Not
voice. Do the voice. Yeah, exactly. That's why you're
sure
here.
He didn't hesitate for a second.
No.
So that is an obvious choice. You all know the Hobbit, so we won't get too much into the depths of anything with plot or anything like that.
we've said
same with the
enough.
Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
You all probably know what you need to know about that one. But
Speaking of like already knowing a lot and talking about it, I see Mistborn up there as well. Brandon Sanderson. So you have Tolkien, George R. R. Martin, Brandon Sanderson up here at the top. Mistborn, The Final Empire, the first book in the series. Great audiobook, really good. Michael Kramer does a fantastic job. I love his performance. There's some of the characters that stick with me in that book. The performances are so good. I've listened to this one, and it's great. I highly recommend.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. Michael Kramer is an incredible audiobook narrator, and one that Charles loves to go up to 2 times speed for. So this is one, if it's 24 hours and 40 minutes, if you're like Charles, you can get this done in 1 month.
You can get this done,
of
exactly.
Spotify premium time. Yeah,
Under 15 hours.
For anyone not familiar with this modern classic of epic fantasy. It is, for me, it's Sanderson's like most definitive work, for lack of a better way to put it. Like, this is
Right.
most emblematic of what I love about Brandon Sanderson's writing.
Mm-hmm.
It has fun characters. It has an incredible plot that like has that total Sanderlanche exciting climactic finish.
Oh
It's
yeah.
got plot twists, and I think what it's probably most known
Mystery,
for is
suspense.
the, to me, my favorite hard magic system of all time. Like, if you ask
Mm-hmm.
me, oh, what is the best hard magic system of any book? I mean, once I get my throat clearing out of the way about how, well, it is subjective, I would just be like, well, Mistborn.
Yeah.
Because it is absolutely incredible to watch Sanderson explain this incredible magic system in a way that's so comprehensible, and then use it in a way where, like, we as the readers, or and in this case the listeners, are able to like feel like we could apply the magic system, and we can try to solve the problems ourselves even before Sanderson
Yes.
gets into it.
And the reveals and the twists come from just unlocking a certain understanding of some of these systems that he just completely invented. And so that is such a rewarding part of the reading experience here. And we recommend this all the time as a gateway series. And I think if you're someone who maybe hasn't gone into audiobooks a whole lot, maybe you're a fantasy reader, and you have Spotify for music, and like, this is a great one to jump into because the performance is excellent, and Michael Kramer is one of the titans in the audiobook narrator world, and his wife as well, Kate Redding. The two of them are just absolute fantasy audiobook narrator staples. So highly recommend it. It's hard to have an audiobook recommendations episode without either of their names coming up. So you get Brandon Sanderson, you get Michael Kramer, you get the whole package here.
Right. And I have to say, Charles, it's kind of funny reading this description here. Are you seeing this?
I haven't read it,
Brandon
but
Sanderson, fantasy's newest master tale spinner. This was written, I guess, in 2008. Dares to turn a genre on its head by asking a simple question. What if the hero of prophecy fails? What kind of world results when the Dark Lord is in charge? So that's that's some of what it gets into. It's not how I
we
would
will also be
necessarily
watching
describe the
out
book,
for
but-
this newest
Right.
master tail spinner, Brandon Sanderson, and we'll see where he goes. The other one's like, not my job. Just copy paste 2008's description into
For sure.
Spotify. Yeah, Spotify didn't even exist, so it's kind of funny. All right, well,
Yeah.
what else we got?
What
go
else
back.
do we got?
Just is Way of
Let's-
Kings on here? By the way, is there a way we can search for that?
Yeah,
I
there's a
didn't
way
mean to
we can
derail
search.
you, but because a lot of
no,
people will
Charles.
say that's Sanderson's magnum opus, and
Yeah.
they're not wrong in saying that. Oh, I could look it up while we continue.
Yeah,
Actually, I do have it on
anytime-
that.
Yeah, we can just search it on our phones. That one is not on Spotify Premium.
Ooh. So this is your Sanderson exposure right here. So
Yeah.
that's the way to get it. Good
Yeah.
to know. So let us keep, and I would recommend starting here anyway. But another Way of Kings is also Michael Kramer and Kate Redding, and they do a great job. So let's see what else we got.
Let's do the show all for the most popular ones, and
Okay.
eventually we'll get
you're
into some
scrolling
deeper,
by some
deeper cuts.
some
Yeah,
big
I won't-
names here.
Right.
Just to say really quick, because I'm going down the list from top to bottom, I see The Witcher, and I see a bunch of books on here. Do not listen to Blood of Elves. Listen to The Last Wish. That's the only one. And The Sword of Destiny. If you liked The Last Wish, then check out The Sword of Destiny. Those two are both very good. They're short story anthologies. It's the best that The Witcher has to offer. So if you're a fan of the show, or if you're a fan of the video games and you haven't given the books a chance, it can be super confusing with where to start, but definitely check out The Last Wish. And it's a short book too. I mean, the audiobook duration is only 10 hours. So even at 1x speed, you've got
Yeah.
hours to spare to go over and start something like Feybound or Mistborn, or what was it? A Game of Thrones? So I just wanted to say that really quickly about The Witcher, because I see like a bunch of them popping up, probably due to like the popularity of the show. So
Yeah, and along lines of that, a Game of Thrones book that we, of course, have not heard of by the young up and comer George R. R. Martin. There is Fire and Blood as well, which is the basis for the House of the Dragon, which we're excited will be coming back this summer, right, Charles? So if you want to get into some more historical style storytelling than you get from the main A Song of Ice and Fire series. But I mean, George R. R. Martin, one of the masters of world building, and of course we're all super interested in the Targaryens and their line of everything that's played out for them, and it has stories outside of just the stuff that's inspired House of the Dragon. That's a particular moment in time of the Targaryen lineage, and this gets more expansive. So lots of good stuff for these massively popular series. I've received adaptations, and that's a lot of what we're going to find in the most popular category. But Charles, it's far from all we're going to find there, because we're also going to find The Blade itself by
huge.
Joe Abercrombie. And Charles, we've reached a point now with this series, this just mastercraft in grimdark storytelling. But Charles, there's something at this point for us that's just next level. When it comes to these books in listening to the audiobook, and that is because of the one, the only Stephen Pacey. Tell me about Stephen Pacey, Charles.
Oh my gosh, he is the best in the game. And I think you would agree with me, Dylan, when I say if you only listen to one audiobook on this list from this episode, and you haven't done any of the Joe Abercrombie, Stephen Pacey audiobooks, this is where you start. Even if you've read the books before.
Agreed.
This is a whole, like, sometimes an audiobook is just a nice way to, like, read a book while doing other stuff and not having to sit down and actually read it. It's a great alternative. In this case, it's a totally different experience. And like you said, Dylan, it's the value that Stephen Pacey brings to the characters. It's rare to see, and like Joe Abercrombie fits this weird realm as a fantasy author that like hits a strong chord with us because he's being like subversive but also comedic but also epic and grimdark. You know, he's playing with and balancing all of these things, and Stephen Pacey gets it. He gets the tone of these books, which can be a really hard thing to like kind of understand the subtlety and the nuance going on in the tone of the voice of these characters. And he gets the humor. He gets when it needs to be deprecating or scathing or humorous. Like he rolls with it, or serious. And he delivers these bravado performances that are so good. And it's some of the best performances in audiobooks I've ever heard. And I'm definitely, like, I seek out Stephen Pacey audiobooks, but as the only narrator that I would do that. And he narrates every single Joe Abercrombie book. So, you know, I've read all of the Joe Abercrombie books at least 2 times, maybe 3 times, and most of it has been through audiobook. And the performance is just so rewarding each time. And he does all of the 9 books that are out, and then the 1 short story collection. He does all of it. There is a short story where Joe Abercrombie comes in, which is fun. But other than that, it's all Stephen Pacey. So highly recommend.
Yeah, the guy is, I totally agree, the GOAT when it comes to the audiobook narration game. And he has this theater background that listening to these books, it's like listening to the greatest one-man play of all time. Like the unique voices he brings to the characters, the times when he does get more theatrical in his performances. I mean, Charles, you've cut clips out of his his audiobook
I
narration
have.
and just like you've uploaded them to our own. We play a personal game of Dungeons and Dragons, and it's like
Yeah.
we'll do stuff in Discord. You can upload sounds, and Charles has uploaded some Baez, who's the for those of you not familiar, like the first of the Magi, like
A
a
Gandalf
wizard type
equivalent
character, the
type
Gandalf equivalent
character.
of this story. And there's some epic sounds. Just like there's one that just goes yes, like
Yes. Yeah, no,
yeah,
it's
that was
so
a better.
good. Highly,
Yeah,
highly recommend. And the blade itself kicks off the whole first law world too. So, um, it's a great place to get started. And we think that Joe Abercrombie gets better with every book he publishes,
yeah,
and this is the first book he's published, so you do the math. But it is still an absolute classic. We love this, up there with Game of Thrones as the most influential works of fantasy in our lives, so we have to recommend it. And so many of you listeners come from our Joe Abercrombie book discussions, and we love all of you for that as well. So can't recommend enough. Joe Abercrombie, Stephen Pacey, First Law. Nothing else needs to be said. Dylan, what other series are on the list?
well, Charles, I do want to say, even though you said nothing else needs to be said, it does need to be
Doesn't
said that
need to
before
be
they are
said, but if we
hanged,
want to say something, we totally
it
can.
needs Charles, because
Oh,
before
okay.
they are hanged is on here as well, which is book
Ooh,
2. Last Argument of Kings is on here, which is
wow.
book 3, so you can get through the whole First Law trilogy, the original trilogy, on here. But you're going to want to keep going. You're going to want to spend your whole year of audiobook time on this, because then Best
Yeah.
Served Cold, which is the
Oh,
first
okay.
standalone
Wow. So
book,
the whole
is on
collection's on
there.
there?
Then The Hero's second standalone book is on there. Red Country, is it
Yeah.
on there, Charles?
Yeah.
I'm Googling it, or
Yeah.
Spotify
While
searching
you
at the very
search
moment.
that, I will
It
search for
is.
sharp ends.
Yes. And then do we get into
Sharp ends is in here. Sharp ends is in here.
yeah, then is A Little Hatred also in here, Charles? Does it go into the next?
Ooh, the Trouble with
It
Peace is
is.
included in here. I just searched Trouble with
Yes.
Peace. But would they dare include Wisdom of Crowds? The
Would they
last
dare,
book?
Charles?
Would they dare? And they dare. They dare. So you have 10 audiobooks to listen to. And what a great companion piece would our episode discussions on all of those be? What a great companion piece. You could have nothing but rich, rich, delicious content for a year listening to all that stuff. So definitely check all of that out.
Yeah. All right, Charles. Well, it's really exciting to see a a certain book here on the most popular ones on Spotify Premium. It's The Shadow of the Gods, and also the sequel, The Hunger of the Gods, by John Gwynne. We've been honored to become friends with his sons. We've worked with them a couple of times.
Brothers
It's
Gwynn.
Ed and yeah, the brothers Gwynn. You can find them over on YouTube. Ed and Will. They're just fantastic folks, and their dad, John Gwynne, wrote an absolute. I mean, when we talk epic fantasy, Charles, this is one of those books that just has to come to mind. This is the first book in the Bloodsworn trilogy. It is one of those books that doesn't give us our typical like Western European medieval type setting. This one goes a little bit more toward the Norse side of things, and it is just an incredible story with like gods and monsters and incredible cinematic fights, but all that at the core of the story, Charles, as I think you'll agree with, is a story of family and motherhood and just what it takes to be a hero in a world that is ridiculously dangerous. And
Yes.
it is epic in every sense of the word.
Yes, and you have great mythical creatures in here, um, gods, of course, as it says in the title. And if you're someone that likes a good shield wall or a fjord
Mm-hmm.
or a jarl, like it's all in here as well. It's definitely created in modern fantasy like this. It just owns this niche right now of this Viking fantasy North inspired mythology series. It's like the go-to recommendation in the community right now, and rightfully so. The second book, um, obviously Hunger of the Gods, um, was super well received as well. And I believe the third book, The Fury of the Gods, is coming out this year. I'm
Mm.
not 100% sure on that, but I believe it's coming out at the end of the year in the fall. I've heard murmurings, so we'll see if that comes true. But now would be a great time because they're chunk. Well, the first book is 18 hours, but I think the second book is quite
Yeah.
longer. So it's a bit of a beefy series. So definitely want to get started on that now in time. Oh yeah, there it is. Hunger of the Gods also included in premium. Yeah, 23 hours. That's a bit of a chonker. So definitely want to go ahead and get started on this series. If you're a fan of like Norse inspired fantasy at all, check it out. Highly recommend.
Yeah. Totally agree. All right. Then we've got another one that sticks out to me here, Charles, and that is the fifth season by N.K. Jemisin.
Mm-hmm.
And this series has won three straight Hugos. Is what the Hugo maybe doesn't mean what it used to after everything's come out, but this book is entirely deserving of any award you can throw at it, because
Mm-hmm.
this is just a masterful dark fantasy story that
Mm-hmm.
draws from big picture themes that N.K. Jemisin handles masterfully. That's themes like oppression and racism and colonialism, and like all this kind of really big picture stuff that it is hard to tell a story that is incredible from the exploration of themes standpoint, while also, like, if you for some reason weren't picking up on any of the parallels that it has to our real worlds or any of those themes, are just, this is an incredible fantasy story in and of itself. So she does things in this book that are incredible plot twists. She's got an amazing voice. She uses some second person
Yeah,
narration, which is
I was
very
hoping you'd bring that up.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a book that is unlike any other. Like, she pulls off things that I've never seen before or since, and this is a great one to pick up. Charles, did you audiobook this one?
I think I did half and half. I own the book,
Yeah.
and I did a lot of the reading that way, but I do believe I picked up the audiobook as well, Robin Miles. I'm trying to remember if she did The City We Became as well, which is N.K. Jemisin's urban fantasy that I saw
Mm-hmm.
was also in Spotify
Yeah.
Premium. I don't know if she's the same audiobook narrator. I can't remember, but no, it was very good. And like you said, like the second person narration chapters are super interesting. I've only read the first book in this series. I haven't finished it, but the experience just from this book alone, I agree with you, Dylan. It's just like the accolades and the awards and the way that N.K. Jemisin so masterfully takes on themes of race and systematic racism and oppression is like super thoughtful and unique and impactful, to me as a reader. So highly recommend. And I mean, come on, it swept the Hugos, Nebula, World Fantasy, like at that point you can't go wrong, hard to, like, obviously we're going to recommend it.
Yeah. And it has one of the best opening lines in fantasy, which is, "Let's start with the end of the world, why don't we? Get it over with and move on to more interesting things." And it doesn't get much more interesting than the fifth season, which is 15 hours and 27 minutes. So right about that
Ooh, just
mark.
sneak it in there.
I know. I know. Although it would be terrible to be listening to it at one time speed, and then
Could
you
you
reach
imagine?
the last 27 minutes, and you're like, oh no, I have to
It's
wait
like
a
I have
month.
to, yeah, that would be horrible. So this is one of those ones where you follow Dylan's advice and budget the syncing, or like for the last hour, you listen to it at 2x speed or something, or
Yeah, or
however that
just
math
like
works out.
literally, if you listen to it at like 1.1 or something, like you'll hardly
Yeah,
notice any difference, but
yeah,
you'll
yeah,
save
yeah.
yourself that 27 minutes.
Because that
All
would
right.
probably be an important 27 minutes at the end there. You can only imagine.
Yes, very important.
I mean, the last
But
2 minutes may be credits or something, but that still leaves you with 20 minutes of
yeah,
action-packed
you don't want to
conclusions.
risk it.
You don't want to
Yeah.
miss it, yeah. Dylan,
All
I see
right.
some. You just
Well,
scrolled past two big
I
ones.
know. I know. I'm just trying to get some ideas of where even to dive into next. I mean,
Well, I see two in that row, Dylan, and you're hovering over the one that I think in that row is the biggest. Oh, you had the other last one. Yeah, there we go. Would you like to share that with the listeners, Dylan?
of course, this is The Lies of Locke Lamora by Scott Lynch. Narrated by Michael Page. This is one that I've read physically and listened to the audiobook. This is one of my favorite books of all time. I mean, period. And
Yeah.
it is the story of Master Thief, Locke Lamora, and his gang of thieves as they pull off some of the most fun, interesting heists that you're going to see. This has, I think, pretty much everything you could want in a story. It's got, like, Locke Lamora is up there in my top few favorite characters in all of fantasy. It's got great characters. It's got great depictions of relationships, like friendships, especially. It's got plot twists that you're unlikely to see coming, but maybe even most appealing about this book might be the dialogue. I mean, it is so witty and entertaining and fun. And Charles, I think you'll probably want to get into one of your favorite parts when it comes to that dialogue.
The cursing, people, masterful swearing, masterful cursing, just people being clever and witty and also like super coarse in their language. It is an art form in this book. And I also wanted to call out Michael Page, since we are talking
Yes.
about audiobook recommendations. Michael Page is another one of those incredible audiobook narrators. He brings this sort of classic, he's got this like British accent that can come in his performances that really just kind of elevates the like Mediterranean inspired setting in Lies of Locke Lamora. But he also narrates friend of the show Robert V.S. Reddick's book, The Red
Yes.
Wolf
Good call.
Conspiracy, The Chatham Voyage. And I looked it up that book is also included in premium,
Yes.
which is a huge win for y'all, us friends talking fantasy and the Robert V.S. Reddick fans out there, because we had the pleasure of doing a read along with Robert V.S. Reddick himself of the Chatham Voyage. And one of the things that he said over and over again every time we jumped on to talk about the book was how he could not believe that he scored Michael Page to narrate his series, and he considered it a huge honor. And I could see why. He's definitely one of the top tier audiobook narrators in the fantasy genre for sure. So if you haven't had the chance to listen to one of his performances, you could check it out with The Lies of Locke Lamora. You could check it out with The Red Wolf Conspiracy.
Yeah, and Michael Page, his versatility, like
Yeah.
so this is another series, the Chatham Voyage series that I initially read, and then I did listen to some of the audiobooks when we were doing that reread. So I've done the physical reading and the audiobook reading of that series as well. And Michael Page's versatility to go from the super witty, more morally gray character like Locke to then capturing a totally different voice for the characters in Catherine Void series, many of which are a little bit more uh, typical heroic main characters, I would say. They have a lot of depth as well, but they're
Mm-hmm.
not quite in the Locke Lamora mold of the anti-hero as much. And he captures those voices extremely well. It's like he can become Locke Lamora if you
Yeah.
need him to. Like it can almost start to feel inseparable. And he anyway, when it comes to Chatham Voyage, I want to make sure we give that recommendation fully as
For
well.
sure, because we've kind of
That's
been going down these super popular
I
greatest
know.
hits. So it's like it's nice to be able to get off of Spotify's recommended and get into like the good stuff. You know what I'm saying? So for sure,
Yes.
go for it, Dylan. Recommend this
Yeah, the
book.
Catherine Voyage series. I often attribute this as the series that really made me into a fantasy fan, and I'm always grateful to Robert for writing such an incredible series that did that. Like I did, as much as we love to pretend that we have no idea what a Game of Thrones is, I did read those books inspired by watching the Game of Thrones show, and it kind of got me to this point where I got back into reading and reading fantasy in particular. And I was like, okay, well, I know I love these books, I love the show, uh, and I need something to see, hey, am I just a big Game of Thrones fan, or am I a fantasy fan overall, where I need to start really seeing what this genre has to offer. And
Hmm.
I went to the now famous bestfantasybooks.com. There's some, that's what it was, right? And
Yeah, one of
I
those.
saw some of the more underrated recommendations that he had for fans of Game of Thrones, and this was a series that came up, and it is a story of characters who are on this gigantic ship that is almost like a world unto itself, which is called the Catherine, and they are taking this noblewoman's daughter across the sea as kind of a like to be a bride, like a treaty bride, to try to finally cause peace between these two big nations that have been warring for as long as anyone can remember. And the adventure that kicks off from this story is one unlike any that you've seen before. It's another really high fantasy series where you've got like so many really creative characters and races and all this kind of stuff. Like we have everything from talking rats to
Which is a performance worth listening to from Michael Page, Felthrop the Rat.
for sure. We've got talking rats. We've got these little like miniature warrior people. We've got such creative monsters that are not just your typical, oh, it's a dragon. It's like
Hmm.
Robert V.S. Reddick will give his own take on that kind of monster. And we've got gods. We've got extremely powerful wizards, and we've just got an adventure for the ages. Absolutely love this one, and I hope folks check out the Red Wolf Conspiracy as an
Yeah.
audiobook.
And just to hear Michael Page say the main character's name, Pazulpath Kendall, like over and over, you're like, ooh, this is a vibe right now. I'm feeling it. So agreed. And then, we've had the privilege of talking with each book, doing a book discussion in depth with Robert V.S. Reddick himself. So what a great companion piece to this as well, just to dive like that extra layer into the inspiration behind these stories, more context, questions. Like I think back on those episodes fondly. It's hard to believe how much time has passed since we've done that. It feels like a lifetime ago, but the content was super, super good. And Robert Reddick was so generous with his time. So generous. More than any author we've ever had the privilege of working with. So amazing guy. Definitely support him and give this book a listen if you haven't before.
Yeah, that is very true. Charles, there's a lot of other really good ones in this
I know.
best-selling
I think we're going to have to start
category. I
lightning rounds and delve a little deeper too.
Yeah, I wonder if it. Do you want to? We'll give a few more that are popping up in these best selling, or not even best selling, most listened to, I guess, because
Yeah.
we're not paying anything. But it's. Let's just throw out at least Jade City by Fonda
Yeah.
Lee.
Yeah.
That's a great choice. The Magicians by Lev Grossman. Book is.
Great audiobook, by the way. The Magicians. Oh my gosh. That was one of the first ones. Who is the narrator for that? We haven't covered it on the show.
Yeah,
Yeah, right there. Who
which
is
is
the audiobook?
wacky.
Mark Bramhall.
Mark
He is so
Bramhall.
good. He's funny. He's so funny. Like the way he delivers some of the characters, because like they're like late high school, early college, and he can put this,
Yeah.
like kind of whiny to people that can do like incredible magic, and they're joking around with each other, and they have dramatic moments, they have funny moments, and whatever you feel about the show, totally not related to the story that I absolutely loved with The Magician. This is one of my favorite series ever. It's like Harry Potter for grown-ups, and like what if every character was depressed, and one of my favorite representations of depression that I've ever read. So absolutely, definitely check out The Magicians by Lev Grossman. Great audiobook.
Yeah, I'd second the depiction of depression being really strong, and I'll say this is one where there's another opening line I love, which is Quentin did a magic trick, nobody noticed.
Yeah, I love that
It's
one.
one of those you just hear Mark Bramhall say that, and you'll be immediately hooked. So, love that series. Can't believe we haven't covered it on the show. That is kind of odd when I think about it, but
yeah, we'll get there. The show kind of ruined it, but we'll get there. Once the show has been far enough into the past, we can remind people about the books. That's my opinion, anyway.
yeah.
Let's see. We're diving deeper. Oop, I see Nicholas Eames here. Kings of the Wild. That's a fantastic one. Reddit darling. That's gone like super popular.
I'm seeing some Brent Weeks as well, Charles.
Oh, yes. Definitely, if you like something like Mistborn and wish it was bloodier and more graphic and more violent, then you cannot go wrong with Brent Weeks. And I think, does Michael Kramer also do Brent Weeks's work? I can't remember. Oh, no,
Simon
someone
Vance,
totally different.
But I know that name is familiar to me. I gotta think what else Simon Vance has done.
But I remember I did the audiobook for some of Brent Weeks's work, and I remember thinking that the narrator was very good. So,
interesting.
He's an award-winning
Simon Vance
narrator.
has done a lot of Dune, has done Fire and Blood, George R. R. Martin.
Wow.
He
did the Black Prism. So, yeah, that's what we're talking about. That's how we found
Viktor
it.
Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning.
I don't know that one.
He's got range.
He's got range.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
okay. Well,
shout
a
out.
lot of Simon Vance out there.
And
The
your
Girl with the
series has to be
Dragon
good
Tattoo.
when you're pulling in the talent of someone that did Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. That was like the book. Boy,
Oh, I
back in the
bet
day.
this is where I know him from, Charles.
Oh.
Tigana.
Oh, he did Tigana's
Gabriel K.
audiobook? Now, is
Yeah.
that going to be included in Spotify Premium? Because otherwise we
Only
can't
one
talk
way to
about
find
it.
out. Yeah.
Drum
let's
roll,
look.
man. This is suspenseful.
Tigana is included in premium.
Oh, this is huge. This is huge, everyone. This, again, we get to dive a little deeper. And let's recommend Tigana. Go for it.
I mean, Tigana is just... So Guy Gabriel Kay is oftentimes considered the master of the standalone book, and Tigana is oftentimes considered his magnum opus. It is in a more Mediterranean setting, and the reason I start with setting here is because, as Charles would I'm sure love to get into, because he's read a little bit more of Gabriel Kay's work than I have. his settings are so lovingly depicted. And this
Hmm.
is a guy who makes the world come alive in a way that I just don't know if any other fantasy author has for me.
For
Charles,
sure.
you want to say a little more about that?
Yeah, I'll just say he brings a lot of extensive historical research into his fictional worlds. And Tigana, a lot of that is Italy and the Mediterranean specifically. And he has other books like Under Heaven, which is more of like ancient dynasties in China. And he's able to just do extensive research academically on real history and pick up on these themes and these symbols and this symbolism and bring it into a totally original world and fantasy. And he's able to do that like no other author I've ever seen. I mean, a lot of authors will lean on the swords and sorcery aspect, and we love that, but Guy Gavriel, as you mentioned, Dylan, he stands out. And Tigana in particular is about like how do you conquer a people, and there's so much more to conquering than just winning the war. It's like systematically erasing their culture and identity, and that's a huge part of Tigana and the way that the magic system works and the way that you have like your empire warlords and you have your oppressed people, and the magic where I believe it's mentioned at the very beginning, like the magic is such that you can't even say the words Tigana or talk about
Yes, the
Tigana as a way
only
of just totally getting them off the map and erased from history.
Right. The only people who can say or hear the name Tigana are people who were born in Tigana before its invasion. So it's like
Mm,
you can't even tell people outside of those born there like
mm,
about your culture or your country or anything like that, because that was
right.
done by this like magic warlord guy who really took it out on Tigana, because if I'm remembering correctly, in the backstory of that is they like killed his son or something that really set him off, and killed his son in just typical warfare, not like something super sketchy. If I'm remembering that part correctly, but
Right.
uh,
It's been
it's
a
got
while.
an incredible ending as well that I want to mention. It's like ties
Mm,
everything together in a way that's really beautiful. There is a little ambiguity and like openness to the ending, but not in a way that's dissatisfying. And I'll also say this is one of those books that when you take a step back and you think about when it was published, it blows your freaking mind. This book is older than me, Charles. It's even older than you. It was,
Whoa.
yeah, it is. It was published in August of 1990. And
Oh, yeah,
that is
pretty
out of control
close.
when you think that this book reads more modern than anything else I can think of from like that year or earlier, really. Like
Mm,
it is it's wacky. Like Game of Thrones wouldn't come out for I think 6 or 7 more years after that.
you're
Assassin's
right.
Apprentice hadn't come out. Wheel of Time? I mean, like what was the first Wheel of Time book that
Oh, The Eye of the
like what was the
World. Yeah, when
date?
did that come out? I think
Let me
after
see.
1990, but I don't
It came
remember.
out 1990 as well.
Oh, okay.
So
So you
we're
got both coming out, and they're so different
yeah,
in
very
terms
different.
of like the first word that comes to mind is maturity, but it's not really that. It's just I guess the like Guy Gavriel has this poetic historical weight to his work that something like Wheel of Time just does not have. I mean, obviously Wheel of Time has a lot of weight to it. And it's a classic series, but when I read this really early on in my fantasy deep diving reading experience because just the idea of a standalone was super appealing to me because so many series are out there that are recommended that aren't finished, and
Yeah,
here was like the potential to get a whole story in one book. So I think that also makes it a great piece to recommend as well.
that's well
Moving right
said,
along, I
Charles.
see you've pulled up another great rec if you want to introduce it.
A fantastic wreck. This is The Book That Wouldn't Burn by Mark Lawrence, his most recently published novel. We're gigantic fans of Mark as an author and as a person.
Yep.
He's been he was someone who we were
He was like
lucky
the
enough to get support
first
from
published
really early
author that
on.
ever showed us any recognition. Like, he's just like, it's a great listen. I like these guys. And it was like, oh my God, it was like, we were like, oh my God, someone's listening. It was crazy. It was
Yeah.
crazy. So always love him for that.
Yeah, I mean that was some of our earlier episodes, and we covered Prince of Thorns, which is also, or did we cover? We actually covered Red Sister before
We
that.
covered
That was
Red
the
Sister.
episode that,
Yeah, that
yeah,
was. Mhm.
yeah. I'll also say Prince of Thorns, his first published novel, is on here, and Charles, it's
Oh,
only
nice.
9 hours and 19 minutes
Yeah, it's
long.
short.
That is short, and you can get that in quickly. I mean, so let's stick with the book that wouldn't burn for now, though, and
Yep.
just say, hey, anything you find from Mark Lawrence on here, that is worth reading for sure. The book that wouldn't burn, though, is like an interesting novel because you can always see the ways that Mark is trying out new things, and he went with a different route here. This is about two different people, two different point of view characters who find themselves connected, according to this description, by a vast and mysterious library containing many wonders and still more secrets in this powerfully moving first book in new series from the international best-selling author of Red Sister and Prince of Thorns. So this book has a absolutely like amazing, but like I used the word phantasmagorical feel to it, Charles, which is like this almost surrealist feel to the world
Mhm.
that he creates, especially
Mhm.
when it comes to the library itself, which is just a library that is like essentially endless with every single book you could ever imagine existing, and it's both the fun that you come to expect from Mark Lawrence's books while also exploring some of these big picture themes that are relevant to today's time, especially when you think of almost this library that has all the information that one could ever gather. It's kind of like having the internet at your fingertips, and what things are changed by nature of having all this information, and because it is different writers and different ways of telling these stories, like in what way does having more information kind of like muddle up the works, and
Yes.
how
Or
do
how
different
can you
truths. Yeah.
control the distribution of the knowledge to
Yes.
maintain influence over people? How can you abuse access to it? And I, which is a fantastic theme. But one of the things that, in my opinion, kind of separates Mark Lawrence or makes him distinguished from his contemporaries is this almost, I'm going to say, science fiction
Yeah.
influence. Not that I don't know if he would necessarily agree with those terms exactly, but he definitely pulls on science and definitely like technological ideals into his fantasy centered stories, and he'll blend magic and technology in really interesting ways. And that is, I think, it goes as deep as he's ever gone in this book, into some of the complexities around weaving technology and fantasy together in this story. It's definitely one of his more ambitious, like, magic systems, for lack of a better word to call it, and it's one of his strongest as well, and it's one of his most popular releases, I think. I mean, Prince of Thorns, of course, is his put him on the map, but it's, and he's got a lot of great work, but this book had a really strong launch, and you can see why when you dive into it. It really is some of his best work, and as his latest book too, it's good to see him like pushing himself and his world and his stories further than he has before.
Yep.
Because this is
It's
23
always.
hours. This is one of his longest books, if not his longest. Like, these
Yeah.
books are usually pretty quick. So he put a
Yeah.
lot into this one, and you can tell, and it's greatly appreciated.
Exactly. And I'll also say that the book that broke the world is expected to be released on April 9th of
Yep.
this year. So this is
You
a
gotta
good
get on that.
time to you've got you've got enough time. If you use your 15 hours, even on one time speed, your 15 hours this month, and then a little bit next month, like 7.5 hours, then you'll be fully caught up in time for the book that broke the world. And I'm really excited to read that one, Charles. I'm sure it'll be one of our favorites this year.
Well, we've recommended about 12 books and threw out a couple others. Do we want to just list a few more before we wrap it up here? I feel like we barely scratched the surface. There's so
I
much,
know.
and we are only still in the epic fantasy section. We haven't even gone in further than that.
Okay,
Oh
well,
my gosh, we both just, our eyes just immediately locked on. I was like, oh, well, extend the time of this episode. We cannot stop until we share this one. It's kind of
yeah, I
funny.
mean, I was going to suggest a speed round starting now, but Charles, I don't think we can speed through a book that we would very quickly go to recommend the audiobook version of, and that's The Black Tongue Thief by Christopher Buehlman. And this is a story that it was Christopher Buehlman's entry into the fantasy genre. He was a horror writer before this. This is a story that follows primarily a main character who's a thief, unsurprisingly, and his adventures and hijinks oftentimes along the side of a knight named Galva, who's kind of a foil to him, a lot more serious, where the thief character, or Kinch, is a kind of how do we describe Kinch here, Charles?
He is definitely like a self-deprecating, roguish thief character with a
Yeah.
humor, a sense of humor about him. It's kind of interesting how he's both like a thief, right? But he's also kind of endearing at the same time, and that a lot of that is translated super well in audiobook format with the narrative arts of the author himself, Christopher Buehlman. And we've seen a few times where authors will take on the role of the audiobook narrator, like Patrick Rothfuss did it for Slow Regard of Silent Things. Joe Abercrombie did it for A Hot Second in one chapter of Sharp Ends. But Christopher Buehlman takes it to the next level in a way that I don't think any author has ever committed to an audiobook performance before. He gives this like almost Scottish, like thick Scottish accent, but not quite, to his narration, because a lot of it is from the narration of the main character in the book, who is this roguish, humorous thief character. And he leans into it hard the entire 12 and a half hours of this audiobook's runtime. And not once does it feel overbearing or unwelcomed, which could be such an easy thing to do. Like, if he had described to me on paper, like, so I'm thinking of narrating my own book, I'd be like, there's a lot of great audiobook narrators out there. You don't have to do it yourself. It's like, yeah, and I think I'm going to go with a Scottish accent. You'd be like, I don't know, man. That sounds like a lot. It sounds like you don't really need to stick your neck out like that. But he did. He does have also a theatrical background, and he is, I've read that he is like famous in Renaissance fairs for his character that's like an insult comic like character in Renaissance fairs. So you can see where, and he's got a background in poetry as well, so you can see where a lot of that influence comes into his performance and how he would specifically be pretty well equipped to give a performance. And yeah, I mean, that alone, when we're talking about audiobooks, it's worth checking out. The only one we've recommended where the author takes the lead, and also like he's got a lot of great recommendations from authors that we love, like Nicholas Eames and Robin Hobb, like all coming out to endorse this work. And we've read a couple of his books on the show, and he's like super creative, super artistic author. I personally respect him for his artistic integrity. I think it's particularly strong, which I like. And this book is my favorite of his that I've read. So highly, highly recommend Black Tongue Thief.
So well said there, Charles. I knew you'd be able to give our listeners what they need to hear about Buellman. You're a
Mm-hmm.
huge fan of
Big
his, as
fan.
am I. And Charles, another thing to mention, 12 hours and 26 minutes.
Right in the sweet spot, ladies and
Yeah.
gentlemen. Right in the
A little
sweet
bit
spot.
left over, too,
This
if
one you
you
probably wouldn't want to bring up to 2x. You'd be like, hey, blah, 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 blah. Ruin the performance.
Yeah. All right, Charles.
Let's
Let's
keep
do our
going.
speed round here.
All right,
Let's
you
see
want to
what
like,
comes up.
as you scroll, just kind of like alternate? Say a name, I'll
Sure.
say a name.
All right, I'm scrolling here, Charles.
All right, what do you see?
Let's see. Okay, Black Sun by Rebecca Rowe Norris. I haven't read the audiobook version of this yet, but I will say that's a fantastic story.
Mm-hmm. And I
can
see
recommend that.
Royal Assassin, Robin Hobb, which I'm assuming Assassin's Apprentice would be in here
It
as
is.
well.
Yeah.
Kind of odd. I've never seen that cover before. Super weird looking. Where they get like a super, it's like too realistic looking, like 80s cover of a guy holding a sword. But anyway, rapid fire. We'll keep going.
All right. I can recommend.
Now we're really getting into
Ooh. We're getting deeper cuts.
we're
for
getting
sure now,
deeper
so,
cuts now. This is,
Oh, Charles.
oh.
I don't think you audiobooked this, but I'm
I
sure
did
you'll
not,
recommend it.
but I'd be interested. The Spear Cuts Through Water, Simon Jimenez, strong release, and really interesting. We talked about it. It was one of my top books of last year, and then we talked about that on the SFF Addicts podcast. So definitely check that out.
Yeah. And Charles, I'll also say that you've got The World We Make listed here, and
Yep.
I think you mentioned The City We Became.
Yep, and that one's interesting because it has like sound effects and performances, and it's like pew pew pews and honking horns and like music at in the action scenes. So that's kind of stands out in this collection.
For sure. We've also got Blood Song by Anthony Ryan. That one is absolutely fantastic. It's a great fit for fans of the Kingkiller Chronicle, I'll say, because it's got a similar premise in the sense of this like legendary warrior is recounting his story to a chronicler, but the similarities mostly are ending there in terms of the characters themselves, but it's a fantastic book by Anthony Ryan.
Yep, I see the Final
highly
Strife, which we
recommend.
talked about earlier. Good to see that there. I see Sarah J. Maas has stuff everywhere, which is good to see as well.
Yep. Senlin Ascends by Josiah Bancroft. This was an indie darling that was in Mark Lawrence's self-published fantasy Blog Off, and then it took off and it got a traditional publishing deal. But just this one has some surrealist elements, as well as a character tries to climb to the top of the Tower of Babel to find his wife.
Interesting
Charles.
that it's right next to the Autumn Republic. These were both books that you pitched side by side in Friends Pitching Fantasy, and I had a hard time choosing between the two, but ultimately chose this one, the Autumn Republic, Brian McClellan, book one of the
that's
Powder
book
Mage
3.
trilogy. Oh, that's book 3. Book 1 is the
Promise of Blood.
Promise of Blood. Okay, yes. And I see Crimson Campaign is here as well, so I'm assuming Promise of Blood. We must have skipped it on the list, but you know, he comes from the school of Sanderson, you know, people in like a more industrial revolution era snort gunpowder for magic and they fight in wars, and it's, you know, battle, it's like military fantasy adjacent. So really great read, and we just covered it on the show, so we definitely recommend, and you can check out that episode, those episodes. Oh, Dance of Cloaks. What a deep cut for David Dalglish. We had talked about that on the show back in the day. And like, this is a pretty impressive collection. Like, there's a lot to get into in here.
Yeah, I mean, so Charles, what I'm seeing here, one of the books I've noticed hasn't come up, so I'm guessing it's probably not on here, is The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. And that is one of my favorite audiobooks. Another one that I physically read and listened to the audiobook, and then you're like, wow, the audiobook's awesome. I think this might be the way to do
Well,
it in the
good to hear.
future. But Charles, I'm not seeing it on there, but then I just saw here El Nombre del Viento. So I think
Oh,
probably the Spanish version, if I'm
I'd
understanding all
assume
this
so.
correctly, is uh, is available. So if you speak Spanish, or if I'm messing that up and this is like another language, apologies. But
It
my
seems like
my
Spanish to
yeah,
me.
un libro para quien conoce el mágico poder de las palabras. I mean, that means a book for who knows the magic
Your high school
that
level
can be
Spanish.
that can be done with words. Basically, the magic of
Oh,
words. That's
yeah,
what that
something
means,
like
I
that.
think. Yeah, tweet
Okay.
me if I'm that.
Me
Me
llamo
llamo
Quoth.
quote.
I know that one.
Yeah, you can do that one.
That one I got. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
So, yeah, I mean, you Spanish speakers, you get a super solid perk here. I can't
I
speak to
know.
the translation, and we know that listening to The Witcher kind of suffers from translation from Polish to English, but I'm sure it's good. I'm sure it's good.
Yeah. All right.
Um,
Well, Charles.
that got us a pretty decent like way in here. Now we're getting into some of the deeper cuts, and they even have Half a King on here. They have the whole Joe Abercrombie selection.
Yeah.
That's great. That alone is worth the membership, guys. So
Mm-hmm.
let's see.
But
How
oh,
much is
Blackwing by Ed McDonald. Fantastic, grimdark.
Ooh,
Yeah, fantastic. I don't think I did not audiobook this, but that is fantastic, grimdark fantasy with a sense of humor. Great fit for fans of Joe Abercrombie, and 11 hours and 9 minutes for the audiobook.
love
So
that.
that would be a great fit as well.
And if only
Um,
I had known, we've recommended enough books that are under 15 hours that could have been its own subsection. But you
yeah,
know what? Sometimes it's worth the extra time. Yeah,
yeah.
I thought I saw Red Sister just up back there a ways.
Yes,
Yeah,
you
there
did
it
see it.
is.
Red Sister,
Excellent.
Mark Lawrence.
So that
That's
is
usually my.
definitely.
Oh, look at that! Look what came out.
Ooh, the
The
Ruling Sea.
Ruling Sea by
It's
Robert
charted,
P.S.
baby.
Reddick.
We charted.
Yep, that's book
Let's
two.
get that
To
up the charts, guys. Come on. Although
yeah,
that's the not the
book
first
two.
book, but that's book
Yeah,
two. But let's get
you'll
that up
want
the
to read the
charts.
Red Wolf Conspiracy is book one for Robert
Mm-hmm,
P.S.
mm-hmm.
Reddick's.
Oh, MJ Kuhn
Awesome.
is here. Thick as thieves.
Oh,
Shout
hey,
out.
friend of the show,
And there's
MJ
Among
Kuhn.
Thieves. Weirdly, Thick as Thieves higher than Among Thieves, even though it's the second book. But that just goes to show you how strong of a release she had. So shout out. Definitely check that out.
It also seems to have edged out this little known book, The Two Towers.
Ah, well
I don't know
done,
if this
MJ.
is how much this is ranked in order of anything, but
We'll say it
yeah. So
is.
I mean, we're getting to probably a point where The Gutter Prayer by Gareth Hanrahan. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. This is a great book too. Awesome world building. Another one with great monsters and gods, like that epic scale sort of style of
God,
book.
look at all of these. Very impressive. Well, I think we kind of delved deep enough. There's Steelheart. I know you had talked about that. And there's The Girl in the Stars by Mark Lawrence.
Yeah,
One that I have not read yet, but I've been dying to. I hear nothing but good things. Yeah, dude, this is a great selection. Plenty
definitely.
to get into here. You could just in the epic fantasy section. There's so much to read, and we haven't even touched the other genres yet. Although there's been some crossover, so
For
I
sure.
think that's a good place to leave it, man. We did it all.
We did it. I feel really good about all the books on offer, about our recommendations for the books on offer. And yeah, if you have Spotify Premium, you're in for a treat. And there's so many books. I mean, at first, when I saw the 15-hour limit per month, I was like, okay, well, this is fantasy. I hope we're able to feel good about what we're doing here. And then I'm like, oh, wow, you could be doing the Black Tongue Thief. You could be doing Blackwing. You could be doing Prince of Thorns. Like, these are incredible choices, and many more that we mentioned. So there's a lot to love about this. I'm about to be like, there's a lot to love about this offer from Spotify Premium, and then I'm like, you know what?
Hey, whoa, you can't be saying that. This is not sponsored. We're doing this out of the love of our hearts. We know that, over 50% of our audience is on Spotify, and I'm assuming many of you have premium accounts. And hey, Dylan, there's one recommendation we didn't put out there, and that's the Friends Talking Fantasy podcast, which, you probably are already listening. But, it's worth telling your friends.
Is that by George R.R. Martin?
Real up and comer. I wish, dude. I wish, trust me, but no. It's just two random guys, just like two dudes.
Who are they?
Like we need their opinions on anything.
Yeah. What made them think that they should be heard? Like that they need to be heard. That's a great question when it comes to their opinions on this genre. Do they have any credentials? Like any reason? I don't think
they've published any books or work in the industry or anything. I think they're literally just two dudes in their houses on Zoom. Like that's all it is. But somehow they managed to capture some magic, and definitely recommend it. And if you haven't rated 5 stars, I would rate it 5 stars. I have probably rated it 5 stars on my partner's account. I was like, well, if I'm logged in, I'm gonna go over and leave a 5-star ranking, because that's what a real fan does.
Yes, I mean, hopefully when you went in to do that, you found that your partner had already rated it 5 stars independently, right, Charles?
Sure. I don't remember. It's been so long. But actually, I gotta double check now. Because maybe the ratings didn't exist at the time. Could you always rate? It was reviews that are new. Ratings you could always do.
No, ratings on Spotify started while we were on hiatus, I remember.
Oh. Well, in that case, I have to Google it.
Are we about to get a 5-star review?
Friends Talking Fantasy podcast. Okay.
This is just absolutely compelling.
Okay, so how do I go back to because it's just trying to play the last episode I was on, which is apparently the 200th episode special.
Well, Charles, if you want to rate or review, if you want to rate on Spotify,
dude, we got 149 ratings. I mean, who's going to be number 150? Like, come on.
What's our average
I'm not
rating
following. It's not following the show. Come on. So I'm hitting follow.
Following?
It's added to my library. Okay.
And Charles, what is our average rating? Out of curiosity,
our average rating is a 5.0, which is freaking insane. You guys,
thank you
amazing.
all so much.
But now, Dylan, really wait. I've heard you give these instructions a couple times, but you hit the buttons, rate show. Okay. Oh, there is a 5-star rating on here, but so we're good.
After all that.
After all that, I wasn't following. She must have unfollowed, but she got the 5 stars, and that's really what matters, people. At the end of the day, right?
You have something to talk about with your partner. And
she doesn't read fantasy books like we do, and I can respect that at some level. So,
but I don't respect her unfollowing. Just ignore it. Just let the downloads come in.
Yeah, well, maybe there was never a follow, so I followed now, and we'll be tracking it closely, and we'll be live updating every episode, so you definitely want to come back next week and check that out. I think we'll maybe even have a guest on the show, and they'll just have to wait while we check. But you know how it is. You know how we do. This is why you guys come over here, that end of the show. This is when it gets real, Yeah, the banter. Thank you. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And of course, what else we do at the end is the sweet, sweet outro music.
Yeah, we get that sweet, sweet outro music pumping.
Let's do it quickly. Thank you, everyone, one and all, for listening to yet another very exciting episode of the Friends Talking Fantasy podcast. If you like what you heard today and you want to support the show, the best way to do that is over on the socials. That's at the FTF podcast on Instagram, and now officially TikTok. We're there. We're doing video now. You can see our faces, which I'm sure you just can't wait to see those. And also, we're on Twitter still at the FTF Podcast with the number 1 on.
Did you tell them our TikTok account name?
Yeah, it's at the FTF Podcast, right?
Oh, okay. Yes.
Yeah.
I
said on Instagram and
I
TikTok.
need attention on there. Give me attention on TikTok.
We need attention on there, guys. Like, we need the validation, and that's just what it's all about. So make sure you're over there giving us that much needed validation. Our parasocial relationship is very important to us, so we gotta make sure that you're nurturing that over on the socials. Now, Dylan, if they like what they heard today and they want to support the show even more than following us and engaging with us over on the socials, what can they do?
Toss 5 stars to our podcast. Be just like Charles's partner, except don't unfollow us. It is so easy to do on Spotify. You just gotta go to our page. You've got to click about for some reason, and then you just click on where those stars are. Throw us 5 of them, and we really appreciate when you do that. You can rate and review on Apple Podcasts as well. That means you can write nice things about us. You can tell us how Charles really hit the note on that, like when he was welcoming us at the beginning of the episode. I didn't comment on it, but I was like, wow, like he hit
really
it well. So you can write about that.
Thank
in a
you.
review.
I gotta go back and listen.
Yeah, just listening is more than enough. Thank you so much for doing that.
Well said, Dylan. Just listening is more than enough. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for making it all the way to the end. Thank you. And as always, go forth and conquer, friends.